welcome back to the PrevenTable. PrevenTable, we still haven't decided on what emphasis we want to put on the syllable, but welcome back. And with me today is Poli. And Poli and I are in similar circles on lots of different groups, and Poli is somebody that I'm always looking at on my social feed because of all of the advocacy. I'm going to say that. And then, I mean, you are very vocal. You are a very vocal advocate, specifically around, trauma-informed care and violence prevention. We live in the city of St. Louis, so gun violence is top of mind for a lot of people. So thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
You have a really interesting perspective. I mean, you've been working in this field of trauma and violence prevention for quite some time. How many years?
So as a direct practitioner, I worked about 8 years,
Wow.
and then I transitioning into doing community engagement work about 6 years ago.
Wow. And then you also were you born here in this country? You're from Puerto Rico, correct?
I am from Puerto Rico. Some people forget that we are part of the United States.
Oh, duh. I stepped in it.
No, you're fine. Actually, we should talk about
Let's
it because
do it.
it actually affects everything, right?
It does.
Of who I am. So Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Some folks would describe us as a colony, others as a territory. So it depends how folks feel regarding politics.
But you've lived in St. Louis since grad school?
No, even before I came for undergrad. I came here when I was 17.
Really. And you are the child of somebody who has struggled with substance use disorder.
My dad struggled for about 25 years. And a little bit after it, my parents divorced, and my dad decided that it was time to seek help.
Really? So is your dad in long-term recovery?
He is, and
Awesome.
he actually runs substance use work in Puerto Rico.
Get out. I didn't know that. Learning something new. So how has I'm curious about a couple of things specifically with your dad. So I'm wondering, like, when you were growing up, I feel like families kind of go one of two ways. Either it's talked about all the time, that this is what's, so to speak, in our genes, that this is something that we have to pay attention to, or it's like completely shoved under the rug and no one talks about it. That's generally the two camps. Did your family fall into one of those camps, or were they somewhere in the middle?
I would say a combination
Okay.
of talking about it, and at times perhaps the suffering on my grandma was there on my maternal side, because I do have stories also from my uncle using heroin. And then me being involved like as an intermediary, as a sense of my mom called me to have my dad come and help with my uncle.
Wow.
Later when I was in, I think I was probably in grad school at that
Wow.
point. So I've seen it from many different angles. I also have wild stories that my mom didn't know till recently. It's been a combination of piecing things together.
Mm-hmm.
Stories that my mom was at, stories that my uncles were at that they hadn't shared with my mom. And this has all come together now recently as an adult, and it was because my uncles and my mom we were all sitting at a table with my husband. So my husband for a long time thought my stories, he thought that I was lying, and then it was my sister corroborating some of it, and then my mom and my uncles, and it's all come together probably in the past 3 to 4 years.
Really?
So my dad was a mob doctor.
I'm sorry. I thought you said mob doctor.
Yes.
Okay. Your dad was a mob doctor.
In a sense, I think that would be the
a
term
doctor
use.
to mobsters.
So my dad went to med school.
First of all, are you allowed to say this, or do you need to go into the witness protection program after?
I think for a time he was being sort of investigated for different reasons. So my dad also was an activist in the 70s.
Huh.
So he
Is that where you get it from?
That's my sister says your dad, but I don't think I don't deserve the term. I think to be called an activist is an honor, and I don't think I'm there yet. I don't think I've earned that. So
I would respectfully disagree, but continue.
So I am gonna go back to the story. So growing up, my dad would help folks who had been injured, and they would come to his house for help at times, maybe to remove a bullet.
Oh, and like they couldn't go to the emergency room.
Correct.
Got it.
I also have, and my dad would we would have conversations. This is just like casual conversations.
Oh, okay.
Like that he would share with me. So that's why I'm very I have memories of going to my godfather's house and just cocaine being on the table. Like we're talking
like Scarface cocaine.
Yes, like amount of cocaine on the table, and I was probably about 4 or 5.
Wow.
My uncles have stories of going because my dad said, "Oh, can you come help me do something?" And suddenly being surrounded by the police and just finding their way out. Maybe I'm sharing too much, but I have wild stories that
we can cut anything.
So then, my husband, these stories I didn't know that one. I knew other ones. And my mom was like, "Wait, what? You guys he took you guys because those are her siblings to do what?"
Mm-hmm.
And these all coming together now. I am almost 40.
Mm.
So my mom knew some, of course, because she was the significant other.
Right.
Yeah, I have lots of.
So, but your family in Puerto Rico came from generational wealth.
My dad's side, it was built wealth by my grandfather. So my grandfather grew up very, very poor, went to the war, served in the army, and then when he came back, he went to college and became a teacher, and from there, he became the mayor of the town, and then my grandfather was a lender, so he was a money lender. So we lived. My dad grew up okay, right? Like what we consider,
like middle class, maybe
upper middle class in Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. So I kind of moved into different worlds because my mom grew up pretty poor. Mm. But I went to private schools all my life, so it was trying to kind of navigate these different worlds of my grandma living in the projects on my grandma's house, and then my grandparents having several houses that they rented, and they took care of me after school. So all these things, but everything came to head in 3rd grade. That's when my world just, in a sense, fell apart. So Hurricane Hugo hit in September of 88 or 89. I can't remember. I just remember being in 3rd grade. So we were prepping for the hurricane, and my father, instead of kind of staying awake with us, he just went and got high, drunk, whatever he did. And by the time the hurricane hit, he was so in some slumber or whatever you want to call it that he didn't realize that we had lost our roof and we were inside.
Oh my goodness.
So our house was in the 2nd floor. Our house was made out of wood and zinc, and the main floor was made out of cement. So I was itty bitty. In the sense, I have always been tiny. Short.
You are a cute tiny person.
So I was but imagine I was
in 3rd grade, yeah.
But itty bitty that I fit in the fencing between the homes, so I went in in the staircase, snuck myself in and knocked on the door. My landlord said we lost our roof, so she had to open the door. And I remember my parents carrying the laundry baskets with whatever we could save and go into her house. And the hurricane just blew our whole. We had a beautiful deck. This house was big for some reason. Even though it was a 2nd story, it was huge, and it blew our deck in the front of the house. Lost pretty much everything. But for some reason, I think that was it for my mom.
That was the straw for her.
That was I think we've had gone through enough at that point that our house got rebuilt. We moved back, but at some point, I think around January, my mom decided that we needed to leave, and leave in a very rushed way, and also hide. That he found us, because I mean, it's I had to go to school, so he found us.
Right.
in a sense. But I remember being just terrified of this man that was like almost he was my dude.
I was gonna say, so
Yeah,
like
my
it
dad was
sounds
my dude.
like your dad was like your person, and he was up for a
Yes.
good time, and he would, and the next thing you know, you're being told,
And he's threatening my mom in front of me.
no,
I remember
what, how traumatic.
He said, "I am gonna burn your stuff." That's what I remember. In just hiding. So we drove back to her work, but instead of driving into her work, we went to the building across the street where her friend worked and saw him drive like he was going to show up at her work. But luckily, we were in the building across.
Oh, my goodness.
So as a third, that's when everything I was like, my dude, he took me everywhere. My dad took care of me after school. He was the person who took me to the beach and the rainforest. And I did all these really fun things. Even after, like when it was his turn to take care of me. But he was
your person.
He was my person.
And so, I mean, I would imagine your world was turned upside down. Did you have any idea the why? Like, I think some kids would be sort of resentful at the mom, right?
Not at
Did you have any idea?
I don't think then. It was later on because my dad talks about everything. Oh, so there's no... Later on, he would say, like, he would talk about it. He's like, I need help. I need to go to see the psychiatrist. My dad was... He's very open.
Mm-hmm.
He would talk about whatever.
So your dad is now in long-term recovery.
He is. He's been since I would say since I was in 5th grade.
So how is your relationship with him now?
It is not great because there were several things have happened. I think becoming an adult, it's when you get that light bulb hits. But so different things happen, where my dad became very religious. So my dad went from being very liberal, and at the same time became more and more involved with politics.
Okay.
So there were shifts in his politics, but also my dad started also kind of being behind the scenes in many of the campaigns. So dad, but also helping in the community. I think that was his way. His recovery was giving back.
Right.
And that meant also, in a sense, compromising.
So now, how aware are you of the fact that genetics plays a part, right? Not the part. Just because your parent had a substance use disorder does not mean that you will. But how much do you think about that? Did you think about that growing up? I mean, is it something you and your sister talk about? Are you mindful of it, or is it like,
Absolutely. So very, very much so, especially once I started studying more psychology, and I was pre-med.
Oh, man, I'm learning all new kinds of things about you today.
So I was learning I learned that addiction was part of our genetics, but I didn't realize to the point till I actually became trained under Alive and Well 6 years ago. So that's when kind of some of the pieces came together. So I would say that I was the kid that didn't smoke pot, right? Or didn't try pot till probably very late. And I still don't partake in that because I'm concerned. But it's like also hypocritical because I will have a drink or two. So,
it's a complex,
yes.
But it's top of mind for you. Do you ever do what I do sometimes where I drink and then I start to like count my drinks or space out because I know that it quote unquote runs in my family, and I start to like freak myself out a little bit about patterns that I'm exhibiting, even when they're not
so
patterns.
I would say
I'm just overly cautious.
So one, after I'll get sick. So Polly's not. I will not get belligerent. Polly throws up and falls asleep. So that is not. So you are not gonna. So yes. So I always hear my husband in the back of my head. Pace yourself, Polly. Pace yourself. So it's not necessarily. So yes, I am thinking about genetics, but more with my medications because I have pinched nerves and all that. So
you're thinking about the contraindication.
Yeah, I am hyper vigilant about becoming addicted to my medication. So that is definitely like opioids and my sleeping meds. So I am hyper aware of that, and like even thinking, okay, so I've been relying a little bit on my sleeping medication, so maybe next week I need to do a washout,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's a long weekend. So no, I am hyper aware of that. But when you talked about patterns and habits, I want other folks to know that even though those of us who seem strong, but I am weak. I'm here to say I am weak. The beginning of the pandemic was rough. And I found myself having a drink every day. It wasn't like just one drink, and it was both my husband and I. And then he was like, I'm going to stop. And he was just talking about himself. Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the pandemic was rough. The beginning was
Yep.
quite difficult. So I saw myself relying on that one drink. So that definitely, I am hyper aware of that, because I'm like, okay, this can lead to having more than one, or doing it every day.
And it doesn't mean it will, but it's just that in your head, it's a mind thing.
It is. And I want others to know that most humans struggle during this period because we were used to not being able to step outside or spend time with others, and we're social creatures.
Yeah, we are. I would love for you to come back sometime, because we didn't even get into we didn't even talk about the violence prevention work you've done. We didn't even talk about you've talked about trauma, but we didn't really even talk about how trauma, your ACEs score, or where trauma is in the soil, what that can lead to, and what behaviors that might prompt or not, right? We didn't even talk about that. So we need to have you come back. Will you come back?
I will come back.
Okay. Yay. Just want to thank you so much, Poli. And if you are listening and you like this conversation and you want more authentic deep dives with people that just make you say, whoa, how fascinating. I'm like, I can't believe I got to learn something about them. If you are saying yes to all of that, please consider subscribing to our podcast. Thank you so much. Thank you, Poli.
Thank you for having me.